Diamond View starts now. On tonight's episode, join the conversation on women's reproductive health with Reverend M. Michelle Day of Nehemiah Trinity Rising. And now, with Diamond Topics, are our hosts, Lady Yvonne, Lady Tashar, and Lady Moretta.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to the Diamond View. My name is Lady Moretta Smith, and I'm here tonight with Lady Yvonne and Lady Tashar. And on behalf of the Will County Black Diamond Chapter of Top Ladies of Distinction, where our president is Lady Tracy Walker Hines, we welcome you back to Season 5 of the Diamond View. Top Ladies of Distinction is a humanitarian organization, and our motto is serving youth and adults. For those of you who are new to our show, the Diamond View is the brainchild of the Status of Women Thrust, and that is co-chaired by myself and Lady Veronica White.
The Status of Women Thrust program objective is to empower women through education, mentorship, and advocacy, fostering gender equality and promoting their social and economic well-being to create a lasting impact. We encourage you to take a moment, go grab a pen and paper to take notes, do a screenshot, share the video with your friends. We have a great show lined up for you tonight and hope you will share this information with your friends and family.
We also want you to like the Will County Black Diamond Chapter pages on Facebook and YouTube so you can stay connected and continue to meet us on social media. And get your pen and paper ready. Lady Tasha already told you this is going to be some information that you need to write down. The remaining date for this season show is for the Teen Takeover is May 1st, and it's decision day. So you're going to want to tune in for that. It's our final show of the season. And after each show, we want to hear from you. So we want to make sure you take our survey at the end of the episode, and the link will be pinned to some of the posts and in the chat. So be engaged and make sure you take the survey and leave your email address. We just love to hear from you.
That's right. And tonight, we have a really special show lined up for you. But the other night, Lady Yvonne was talking about being resilient, and we thought that would be a great topic to talk about for our diamond topic tonight. Now, what's said doesn't need to be said, because it's already said as to why we have to be resilient, right? We already know what's going on with that. But tonight, we're not really focused on why we need to be resilient so much as what are we doing to build capacity for resilience? And then what's bringing joy to your life right now? Like, that's kind of what I want to talk about.
I want to talk about the joy in knowing and feeling and giving back love. That's what resilience feels like to me. It just feels like love for human kindness, and an appreciation for it.
Well, Lady Yvonne, I would agree with you. This is even more than before. We need to focus on helping each other in times like this. But I know also with everything that's going on, it's been big for me to protect my own peace, and so many times we don't take the time to take care of self, to protect our own peace. So for me, in lieu of everything that's going on, I don't watch the news anymore, so I don't have a nervous breakdown. But I will chime in weekly just to catch up to see what's going on, because as we know, every day something is changing. So, but to protect the peace, I can't watch news. And I've been focusing more, like you say, on serving the people and just keeping my head rooted and grounded in prayer, lots of prayer, to say the least.
Yes. What about you, Lady Moretta?
At first, I was practicing disassociation. But since I'm an attorney, I don't really feel like I should disassociate at this point. Like, now is not the time to do that. So after I came to my senses and said, okay, you are going to have to engage a little bit, I dug back into music. So I've been exploring new music and just particularly motivational music, getting back into exploring some new gospel music. And just because I found myself listening to the same thing over and over again. And I'm like, okay, I can listen to something different. And one of my choir sisters sent me a song that I really enjoyed by Trinity Gill. It's called A Man That's Speaking to Me This Week.
Okay.
And Chandler Moore, Lead Me On, is speaking to me this week. So I
like that song. I gotta look up Amen, but I love that song.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been doing to find balance in it, because I know that I can't fully disassociate. That's not going to work. So I've been finding balance in the music for sure.
Mm-hmm.
In the chat, let's see what is going on with our ladies and friends in the chat. Let us know what you're doing. What are you doing to bring joy during this time? What are you doing to build resilience during this time? We talk about mental health a lot. Now is the time to be protecting our mental health, whatever that means to you. So if that means enjoying restaurant week with your girlfriends, if that means enjoying theater week with your girlfriends, if that means calling up your therapist because you need an extra session this week, do whatever makes sense to you, and whatever helps you build that capacity. That's what I would say. So Jacqueline Stewart says she's doing some self-care and yoga during this time. Thank you, Jacqueline, for sharing.
Love that.
Some of the other ladies that I know, they have been working out a lot. They're like, I think I'm just going to stay for the extra class because I don't want to deal with whatever. All right. So as we continue the show tonight, you can hit us in the chat. Please do engage in the chat. We encourage you to like and share tonight's show because we definitely have a great show lined up for you tonight. We have a lot of content tonight, so we're actually going to move right in to the show with our speaker for this evening.
Before we begin our discussion tonight, we want to put out a sensitive content disclaimer because the topic of women's reproductive health, while very prevalent, can be very personal. So viewer discretion is advised, as tonight's discussion will address various areas surrounding the topic and are personal and can be sensitive and sometimes triggering. Please care for yourself and your mental health. Thank you. And that being said, guys, exploring the preventive care and morality gap in women's reproductive health is a discussion that women, particularly women of color, need to engage in and understand in an effort to bridge the gap.
That's right. Thank you, Lady Tashar. This topic is very personal. It is very sensitive, but it's something that we as a community should be addressing because it is so widespread and the gap is so large. According to the National Institutes of Health, racial disparities in maternal mortality in the United States are staggering. So there is more than a threefold higher maternal mortality rate of 41 deaths per 100,000 live births for Black women as compared to 13 deaths per that same 100,000 live births for white women. And that's just one example. There are a number of factors that contribute to that disparity, but tonight we want to hold space for this discussion and to learn more about bridging this gap.
Thank you, Lady Moretta. Well, let's bring our own M. Michelle Day, MDiv, JD, or Reverend Michelle, as she likes to humbly be called. But, you know, I'm going to say it again, an MDiv and a JD, and we'll keep that moving. Reverend Michelle is an ordained minister, attorney, and certified mediator. She's experienced in conflict transformation, and she's dedicated to the healing of community. She founded Nehemiah Trinity Rising Incorporated, which serves to transform mindsets through restorative and transformative justice education. training, and collaborative implementation strategies in all community settings. She is everything. And through Nehemiah, she has helped to develop trauma-informed restorative justice trained cohorts, and they address disproportionate infant and mother mortality in partnership with Advocate Healthcare and the City of Chicago Department of Public Health. She is an appointee of the Governor's Commission on Children of Incarcerated Parents. And Reverend Michelle has assisted in drafting and implementing the Restorative Justice Implementation Plan for Chicago Public Schools. Reverend Michelle is employed in the resource section of the Circuit Court of Cook County. It always just kind of gets my throat whenever I think about the Circuit Court of Cook County, because that in itself is a huge yeoman's job. And she serves to connect restorative justice practitioners across the city and county and provides restorative justice training to judges and other court personnel. Reverend Michelle is a graduate of the McCormick Theological Seminary, DePaul College of Law, and Indiana University, and a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ. Please put your hands together and a big smile as you're watching us smile right back at you. Let's welcome Reverend Michelle.
Wow, what a welcome. Thank you. And I just want to say I am so excited about being in this space. I love what you're doing. I will try to be as brief as possible so that we can get to questions. But what we're going to do tonight is give you an overview of one of the initiatives that Nehemiah works in. And that particular initiative is surrounding the issue of infant and mother mortality. And it's called the Courage to Love in Action Initiative. And we're partnered with 6 organizations, primarily the Advocate Healthcare and their Center for Community Health, Faith and Community Health Transformation, and the others that you see on the side. And it is sponsored by the City of Chicago Department of Public Health. Having said that, we are absolutely excited about having been invited to lead the restorative justice training part of this initiative, because we stand on the premises with this initiative that we have to be very cognizant and attentive to the health of our children. Our ancestors and our current indigenous partners in this life had it right. The Maasai tribe is one of the most accomplished and legendary tribes of Africa, but they have a traditional greeting that passes between those mighty, mighty warriors wherever they are, and it is Kaserian and Gera, which means how are the children? And that greeting acknowledges the high value that the Maasai tribe always places on their children's well-being. It's how are the children? And the answer better be the children are well. Why? Because they recognize that when peace, health, and protection of the young is the priority of a society, the society itself thrives. And so tonight we will be going through an agenda that is not necessarily in this order, but we promise to get to all of these things. We will share the crisis of infant mother mortality for Black and Brown women. We will give you an overview of Courage to Love in Action and explore the reasons why we are approaching this from a relational standpoint of view, as we're concentrating on building healing-centered learning communities. And then we will introduce what Nehemiah calls the Love, Human Rights of the Child, and Restorative Justice Initiative, which is the umbrella under which we tackle things like infant mother mortality.
I have a question. Reverend Michelle. So you mentioned restorative justice. I think most people probably think of this term in terms of like the criminal justice system and their effort to rehabilitate and create reconciliation. Can you tell us more about restorative justice in the context of our discussion tonight, specifically as it relates to reproductive health?
Sure. I'm glad you asked that question because we spend the majority of our time helping people to understand that restorative justice, and I'm just going to call it RJ for right now so we can save time. But RJ is so much more than an alternative to punishment. It can include the alternative to punishment, but that's just a tree in the forest. RJ is about emphasizing building interpersonal, community, and systemic relationships that prevent or repair unjust behavior through our collective efforts. And it has to be a way of life, not just something that we pull out to address an issue. It has to be a way of life, how we order our society so that everybody is healthy mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. The I am because we are.
That makes sense.
We look at restorative justice using ancient principles. It really is just a term that was coined to apply ancient, ancestral, and indigenous principles for how we are in community get together. So the philosophy, of course, is what I just said, the Ubuntu, the I am because we are, and we are because I am. But it stands on really 4 principles, like a 4-legged stool. In order to have a well-ordered society, there has to be truth-telling. There has to be encounter with any issues that keep us from being well-ordered and healthy. There has to be integrity or accountability. That means everybody in the community, everybody in the family, whatever unit you are talking about, everybody is responsible for the health of that unit. And there has to be hospitality. You know, our faith speaks to hospitality, but our social justice work also speaks to hospitality. You've heard the term, nothing for us without us.
Help us, yes.
Well, if it involves anybody, they need to be at the table helping to determine how it will be addressed. And then finally, there's always the need for mercy or reintegration of all the people involved. If you're involved in truth telling, somebody's feelings are going to get hurt, right? So how do you keep them involved in the community? If you're involved in hospitality, somebody's going to say, why is Lady Moretta here or Lady Yvonne here? And so they'll want to leave the circle. But how do you keep them reintegrated? All of this works together. And then finally, all of the practices, all of the philosophy, all of the principles follow a process. And I think we talked about earlier how, unfortunately, in this country and in many Western countries, we are stuck in a cycle of the insanity of doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. The same thing that we're doing over and over again is trying to address issues without going through the restorative process. A restorative process spends time having people get acquainted with each other so that we understand what perspective each person is bringing to the table, what how they see the issue, if they even see an issue, but getting acquainted. And then building relationships so that we feel safe in talking with each other. What are the boundaries of the relationship? How do I want you to address me? How do you want me to address you? And then addressing the issues. That, for me, was a light bulb moment when I realized, in my practicing of law, that in a way I was engaging in something futile, trying to get issues resolved without having followed an indigenous and ancestral process to do that.
So, oh wow, we're getting into trauma now. Lady Reverend Michelle, is there any information to support the thought that as a community, our shared experiences or our environment, they impact us on women's reproductive health?
Oh, definitely, definitely. As we'll talk later on, what we will find is that so much of what people experience affects their health. And that is definitely true with respect to pregnant mothers and with respect to infants. What is experienced will affect health. And trauma is common. It impacts our health and social outcomes for ourselves and those people we may employ, those people that we employ who are engaging with the people we serve, all of it. So we have to be cognizant of both the long-term and the short-term impacts of trauma and how it can be prevented and healed.
Mm.
So, Reverend Michelle, just a quick question. What about science? I've heard that experiences can be shared through generations genetically. So, how does it really impact the discussion?
Well, let me first start out with this illustration. We call this the trauma tree. And if you look at the very bottom of the tree, what science tells us, and when I say science, I'm encompassing all of the sciences, social science, neuroscience, epigenetics, all of that. But what it tells us is that our collective historical experiences represent the soil in which the tree is growing. So if you have a historical experience of slavery in your background, in your genetics, that affects how the roots of your experiences began to grow. So things like genocide, mass incarceration, Holocaust, forced displacements, like the Native Americans went through. All of that is the soil. And if you grow anything in this world, you know that the soil needs to be healthy. But look at the soil that we have to grow things from. And that type of soil gives rise to roots such as poverty, racism, discrimination, community violence, etc. And when you have roots like that, then you wind up with leaves that represent the individual and what the individual may experience. So the individual, as it's often said, hurt people hurt people. So if you have this historical experience and the community experiences of violence, then you might also wind up with an individual experience of domestic violence, abuse, and neglect. So when you think of that as the summation of the science that we have, one of the points that I would like to point out is the epigenetics portion of that science. If we may have the next slide. Epigenetics simply tells us that our bodies remember. Now, what we have to remember is that our bodies remember back a number of generations. If you take into consideration that trauma tree that we talked about, when you were born, you were carried. Science tells us that your body, so to speak, your DNA was carried in your mother's womb while your mother was carried in her grandmother's womb. So whatever her grandmother experienced while your mother was gestating, you experienced. And that's what we need to help people to understand, is that when you talk about trauma and resilience, and we're going to focus on resilience in a minute. I love the fact that you guys spoke about that. You're talking about dealing with what has happened over generations, over generations. So let's keep that science in mind. We are looking at not just epigenetics, but neuroscience. They know that what happens to you affects your brain. And what affects your brain will result in how you view the world, how you react to the world, how you experience the world. But now that's all the bad news. Here's the good news, and this is the good news in science. And I love what Dr. Carl Bell had to write. And he said just point blank, risk factors are not predictive factors because of protective factors. In other words, our brains are so wondrously made. We are so wondrously made that we were made with brains that are actually elastic. So those things may be poured into the brain that are harmful. Things can be poured into the brain to counteract those harms that help them to stretch in another way. So risk factors are not protective factors because of protective factors. And when we, should I stop here or go on? No. Okay. When we're talking about those healing factors, those things that science has shown us can be poured into us, we're talking about two things. The protective factors are like the shield. Those are the things that are processes and relationships that prevent trauma or lessen the effects of trauma. If you had a wonderful family growing up, then that wonderful family experience acts as a shield for you in the experiences that might deeply traumatize other people. It's a shield for you. But if things get through that shield, there are resilience factors. So if there's not a shield, or if the shield winds up with a leak in it, know that there are processes and relationships that address trauma when it occurs, that promote resilience. I love what you spoke about today. See a therapist if you need to see a therapist. Yoga if you need yoga. Do those things. Have a trustworthy mentor, people that you can talk to, programming that you can do. All of those things can be poured into our brain to counteract. And so that's why we concentrate on addressing the trauma, but also promoting resilience. Which is why we take a relational approach to healing trauma. The rationale of a commission study that we rely, a 2005 National Commission study on infant mortality, hypothesized that infant mortality is among a host of health outcomes that derive from the stress associated with absent, distant, or disordered relationships. If there's tears in the fabric of relationships, then you could know that that's where you need to start in addressing infant mortality and mother mortality. Next slide, please.
All right. So, Reverend Michelle, I'm right here with you. Go ahead. Go to the next slide. Just give me a moment. Let me take a moment. Just right here. All right. Where are we now? What's the crisis? I'm getting a lot of information. You all have your pen and paper. This is a lot. Important, a lot, but it's a lot. Where are we now?
Where we are now. Earlier, you spoke to the national numbers that show that we are not in a good place. The crisis is definitely a global crisis of disproportionate number of Black and Brown mothers and infants that are dying. And they're dying because of disparities in healthcare and life experiences. But in Chicago alone, whereas it's 3 times nationally on the average, Chicago, as of 2023, Black mothers were 6 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related conditions than their white counterparts. And Black infants were 2 to 3 times more likely to die before their first birthday than their white counterparts. And as I said, this is the Chicago story. The national story, as you set forth, is a crisis, but that crisis is felt differently in different states and different areas. We did a presentation in Washington, D.C. over the summer, and one of the groups that was there from another state. And they indicated that, yes, Chicago's numbers may be 6 times more likely, but their numbers were 9 times more likely. And when you think, whether you're talking about the 3 times nationally, whether you're talking about the 6 times in Chicago or the 9 times in that other state, more than 70% of the deaths are preventable. And it's because of things like racist public policies that deny access to resources that are needed to live. And I'm not just talking about needed for pregnant mothers. I'm talking about access to resources that are needed to live. You have food deserts, where the only thing that you can get is unhealthy food, etc. So, of course, that's going to start a pregnancy out the wrong way. You have healthcare deserts. And so the growing problem of maternity care deserts, where there's limited access to maternity care resources, exacerbates the other issues that we face in just trying to get access to resources that are needed to live. Plus, when you look at some instances where mothers have been discouraged from seeking appropriate care because of implicit bias and disrespect, they've tried to get the care, but they have not been able to get it. Those are areas that we can address to prevent the more disproportionate mortality and morbidity.
And one of the things that seems so important to note is that I think oftentimes people in our community, like once they've achieved a certain level of education, once we've achieved what we would deem to be maybe a certain level in society and our networks and things like that, like we feel like we can throw a little money at a problem and that's going to make it go away, or it's going to make the problem not affect us. But this is something that you cannot throw money at. You cannot throw money at racism. You cannot throw money at implicit bias. Like, this is something that is not a class issue. It's not a fame issue. It's not a celebrity issue. It's not a status issue. Like, this is a woman's issue that is really affecting Black women. And we've had celebrity deaths. We've had Tori Bowie. She was an Olympian, a 3-time Olympic track and field star, and she died after complications of childbirth. And then Judge Hatchett, her daughter-in-law, was also an athlete and a businesswoman. She passed during her second child's birth. And it's it's something that you can't throw money at it, and it's really affecting us all.
Mhm.
Lady Yvonne, tell us what you're saying, because you're on mute, honey, but I know you're saying it.
No, I'm just over here overwhelmed by what you're saying, by what Reverend Michelle has said, and just doing a small prayer. So, but now that I'm off of mute, we've had some celebrity survivors. So I was just giving a moment of thanks for those that have made it through. Think of one of the world's greatest athletes, Venus Williams. Think of Beyonce, masterful entertainer, having gone through some of those struggles as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay sometimes to just take a moment to say you're grateful.
Mhm.
That is true. Amen to that. Lady Michelle, I'm trying to make you a lady today.
Right.
Lady Michelle,
I welcome it.
tell us more about your organization and the purpose, and how people can become involved in the trainings. And also give us a little information about how organizations who maybe don't actually go out and do the trainings, but maybe they're, an organization like ours where we have a platform. How can those organizations really be effective in communicating this information and getting this information out, or through your trainings?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, first of all, Nehemiah Trinity Rising is a faith-based organization that has as its vision building an avalanche of people who are aware of and passionate about using the practices and philosophy of restorative justice to address issues of our community. So in looking at building that avalanche, we also do that by educating people, by getting them trained, getting them to that point where they are able to effectuate implementation strategies, and implementation strategies look different for every organization and every group, but also where they need to advocate. We help with advocacy for resources and help them to build collaborations. In this particular initiative, for the Courage to Love in Action initiative, the goal was to build capacity in organizations that were serving families, particularly serving women, pregnant people, and infants, in order to promote trauma-informed, healing-centered care. So we grounded that in the restorative justice practices and principles. And the bottom line was for us to use that relational approach because of the nature of our relationships being the mainstay for shaping factors that influence our health. The commitment, I think we're going to, I'm 2 slides ahead of myself, but if you can go 2 slides ahead, that the commitment for those organizations, they committed to, first of all, a 3-day core practices workshop in which they received training in awareness of trauma and resilience, and healing-centered approaches for promoting resilience. We talked about the everything I talked about today is talked about in much more intensive and long care, because we want people to truly understand the nature of trauma, but understand the real reality of our ability to address it through our resources, through ourselves, through the things that are at our fingertips that promote resilience. So relationship building amongst the cohort takes place as well. But then there are follow-up sessions, and those are also 8 hours a day. And the cohorts recognize the fact that even though they had spent 3 days in learning how to be in circle together and learning about restorative processes, etc., especially through circle practice. You can't stay in a circle all day long, right? So, so they spend time learning about restorative conversations, which are how you probe the causes of trauma, the
Mhm.
causes of situations. They learn about implicit bias, their own, as well as those of people who may not look like you, stereotype threats, and uh, uh, how it needs to be addressed, including our own stereotypes. And then what I love, systems thinking. We help people to not only see the tree of what they're dealing with, but to look at the whole forest. We need to understand that everything is connected. So when we are addressing issues, we're not just addressing them on an interpersonal level, we're addressing them on a systemic level and a structural level, on a community level, so that it can be changed. And then navigating difficult conversations, which is different from restorative conversations, because the navigating difficult conversations is how people who are polarized are
Mm.
taught to speak to each other beyond that polarization so that
Mhm.
we can come to some common areas. And
I
then
think this
finally,
is so important because these concepts are not just applicable here, but I think in terms of what we were talking about earlier, that they are very much well applied in that arena of our lives too. So keep in mind, like these are not just concepts for here. These are concepts to take and really apply in the conversations that you may need to have in the days ahead.
exactly, exactly. Even though we this work and this commitment is the type of commitment that we would require of people who are addressing other issues.
Mhm.
And so this is just what we're helping people who are addressing the infant mortal and mother mortality and morbidity, and where they are actually then put into are able to put these into action begins with what I call a connection cafe. If you've heard of World Cafe or Art of Hosting, the cohort then goes into a full day of taking what they've learned and then sharing wisdom about the issues that they are addressing that touch the issue, and how to brainstorm on how they're going to deal with these issues either within their organization, within their community, etc. So then it's the wisdom in the room that will start to put together the implementation plan. And that's why I say it looks different for every group.
Mhm.
I have a question, Reverend Michelle. I guess, when we're talking, with the disparities and commitment, I'm just curious, what areas, I know you service the Chicago, Atlanta area. Do we know what communities are heavily impacted? I know it impacts all communities. For example, I've seen like per se, we know like if I gave an example of Jackson Park Hospital, they had a big maternity ward or whatever, and that wasn't successful for the lack of people not coming. So of course that was a program that was lost. So do we know if there are specific communities that are more heavily where they need more focus in those areas versus others, throughout, since we're talking about minorities, where there is a greater need?
I could not give you specifics for each community, but I will say that the initiative that we've been working on with the Chicago Department of Public Health, their concentration was the south side of Chicago, west side of Chicago, and certain areas in the north side of Chicago. And so um, Their focus was Chicagoland area. So though we may have plans to push this out into all of Illinois, the Chicago Department of Public Health, being the Chicago Department of Public Health, was concentrating on the Chicagoland area. Now, having said that, we do recognize that there are programs that have not been utilized. And that's why we do the Connection Cafe, so that people can look at, well, what resources are underutilized that we can push forward, or what resources are, and why are they underutilized? Are they underutilized because people have not had good experiences there, or not? So all of that is what the cohort is able to address through their Connection Cafe and their wisdom exchange.
Let's just do a rollback. This is reminding me when you were talking about the tree of life and all those different factors down to the leaves, and the individuals. And it's something you said about use of old soil, how we got to make sure the soil is all together. Can you re-share that a little bit?
Can I what?
Can you share a little bit more about that? Just kind of, I wanted to bring that back around. I think that was an important analogy about
our if you think about what I said earlier about epigenetics and neuroscience, about our being able to pour the positive in to counteract the negative. Right? If the collective experience is mass incarceration, or the collective experience is forced displacement, then you're pouring things into the soil that counteracts that. You can't get rid of history, Certainly history is what it is, but you can address what history has done.
Yes.
And start pouring in, and so that the generations that come next, they will have been raised in different soil.
Yes, powerful.
Right now, and I may be turning this on its ear, but if what came out of slavery and genocide and forced displacement was racism as a root, then being able to address racism kind of changes the soil for the future.
And, I'm just thinking back. It's funny. I think about how the elders used to talk about generational curses or whatever the case when I'm looking at this tree. And, ultimately, it is our responsibility to try to break, those things that bind us, for the future to come, and how it's going to impact the generations to come. It's funny. My pastor always would say, I'm the pastor of your children's children, for the generations to come. And, that was profound to me, because I don't think we think like that, and we should, it's like, you keep pouring this negative mentality, it should follow the generations to come after you. And, that just, and looking at this tree, that's what it made me think about. Okay, we have to break these, these bonds that hold us, but we have to stop thinking in the now moment, and think about our future and what it's going to look like, instead of just dealing with the right now. What are we doing to help the next 2-3 generations, and to educate them about what's going on, to try to get rid of these disparities? I know it will take time, because we have had a lot of resources that we've lost over the years, but I think our focus is in looking at this great presentation you provided to us. It's like, what can we do to make it better? Let us be part of the solution.
I'm glad you said that, because when I said that we're trying to build an avalanche of people who understand the power of relationships, the power of relationships across the board, sometimes we get a little bit discouraged. And one of the things that I continually tell our folks is we are sowing seed. We may not see the harvest, but we are sowing seeds. And so tilling the soil and sowing the seeds addresses exactly what you're talking about, is how are we building the future? How are we flipping that script so that we're addressing how the soil has been tainted by historical experiences.
Mm. That just gave me chills. That's the importance of the resiliency we started out talking about, and
Mm-hmm.
I fully understand courage to love. Completely different than I did when I was a younger woman. Put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a faith-filled walk to have the courage to love and make
It
it
is.
connect.
It is. And no matter where I go, when people are talking about trauma, I'm like, two sides of the coin. There's trauma and there's resilience. Don't talk about trauma without talking about resilience.
Mhm.
At the same time, don't try to talk about resilience. We're always being told to suck it up and bounce
No.
back. But no, don't talk about resilience without addressing the trauma.
So let's go back and kind of pick up on, and I think maybe we just did it a little bit, but pick up on the crucial connections of all of this. Let's tie it all together.
Okay. Nehemiah looks at everything through a lens of love, which is just our faith, human rights, and restorative justice. And for us, love is the why. We should want everybody to be treated the same way we want to be treated, right?
Mm-hmm.
But human rights are the what. We often speak in terms of civil rights, but we're talking about global human rights, the rights that everybody was born with. So that's the what that we're pursuing. And the why. The reason why we're pursuing is because everybody has dignity, right? So everybody should be loved. But the restorative justice, this relational approach, is the how. And so our work is always involved in that initiative. And this Courage to Love was just part of our involvement in our overall initiative. And we were thankful to be invited to do that. But we also look at, I was speaking to Lady Moretta earlier about how one of the other initiatives that we are engaged in is the rights of the child. The Illinois and the United States has not signed off on the International Declaration of the Rights of the Child, let alone the Declaration of Human Rights. But what that means is that our children are being subjected to mass incarceration at early ages.
Mm-hmm.
There's no floor for the arrest and the detention of children. So that's
It's
another
very
thing.
normal for them, especially in the Chicago area, depending on where you are. It's they're normal. That's what childhood looks like for them.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And that's traumatizing our children. So that is adding to that soil that we spoke about. So this initiative, the Love, Human Rights, Restorative Justice Initiative, is one in which we're trying to help people to see the crucial connections between those three. We had a conference last April, which was our first conference of that nature, and the children have taken it and they're going to have another one this coming April. We welcome any help, any partnering, or any attendance, or any youth that you have that want to be involved. We have stipends for them, but the bottom line is to help people to understand the crucial connections. And it's big, it's wide, it's deep, but we're just biting off a piece of the elephant at a time.
Absolutely. We're going to post your contact information. So, ladies and gentlemen, Reverend Michelle's contact information is here if you are interested in learning more about bridging the gap, as we've talked about this evening, or if you are interested in the services that Trinity Nehemiah Rising offers, please contact Reverend Michelle. We'll leave this up for a moment so you can screenshot the info. And do you have any final remarks that you would like to share, Reverend Michelle?
I am just in awe of what you're doing. So I encourage you to continue to do what you're doing, because, as they say, our people perish for lack of wisdom, for lack of knowledge. So congratulations to you.
Thank you. And thank you for this evening. Ladies, do we have any closing remarks for Reverend Michelle?
I just say thank you, because you've given us some great nuggets tonight. And, just, I'm like Lady Yvonne said, it's like your wheels are turning, it's so much information. You're just thinking about the need, there's a need for the people, and what you can do to be part of that, to, fill the gap of what's missing, and to help us as Black and brown people to be better. And not have such dramatic such huge numbers. So thank you for just educating us this evening on a topic that many is not really talked about.
No.
It's not until it happens in your circle.
Yes.
And then it's a surprise.
You want to know everything. And this getting it from the source, even, with such staggering numbers, it's information and awareness are the most powerful things, alongside love. So thank you, Reverend Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Michelle. So as we kind of take away our tidbits for tonight on that, as you know, we talked a little bit about our Buy Black program that we rolled out in December. And so what we'd like to do tonight is actually give you some updates on that program. Many of you participated in that program, and we're going to kind of slide from one area to another area of supporting Black women and Black people in general, and supporting our community. And so we joined and partnered the Buy Black campaign in partnership with the Chicago alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women Chicago Metropolitan Chapter, and the Chicago Urban League. And so we want to share a quick update for you on our numbers for the Buy Black campaign.
And so thank you to those that participated, and by joining this award-winning campaign and making an impact by supporting the Black businesses wherever you were. Thank you. The grand tally from the 17 Will County Black Diamond entries was $50,052. 17 entries. $50,052.
That's crazy.
Thank you all. Thank you. And I'm sure that those Black-owned businesses thank you as well. You are helping them to stay relevant and stay active. Thank you all for participating.
That is awesome. I'm just sitting there. Oh, that tell you we really shop. So wow, the grand total must, all the organizations are still being tallied, then a raffle will be drawn. And be sure to report back and let us know if you are a raffle winner. We would love to hear from you. And I'm just curious to see, how much did you really spend? Um,
Right.
so that was just awesome. And it was a great collaboration and just a great effort to show that we do support each other as organizations and partner well. So awesome job, everyone.
You know what I want to do? In further support of our community, what I'd like our audience to do is drop a line of the vendors that you supported during the Buy Black campaign. If you supported
Yes, that would be
vendors.
great.
So let's push some business that way. Drop their name. If you have their social media, you can drop it in the chat. I know for me, one thing that really touched me, we used a Black florist over the holiday season for a funeral, and it was Flowers by Erskine, and I think it's on 79th Street, if I'm not mistaken. But it was the absolute most beautiful floral arrangement ever. And it was funny because the customer service was amazing. My dad was in the shop, and I called him while he was in there, just kind of on a fluke. And so he was telling me about the arrangement. And when he was done, the owner said, call your daughter and make sure everything looks good. Because I'm bossy anyway. So he was like, he sent a picture, and we did need to make a little tweak. And so I called him back, and he said, I'm so glad that I had him call you. And he said, absolutely, we'll take care of it. And he was so accommodating, and just, it was awesome customer service. The floral arrangement was one of the most beautiful floral arrangements that I've ever seen. And I was just really pleased that we had the forethought to go and support his business. So drop your vendors in the chat that you were supporting. We ended up going to Norm's Bistro like 3 times during that time frame also.
Well,
Ladies, where did you go? Who did you support during that time?
well, I know too. We hit up Kitchen and Cocktails, which is a nice little contribution. But I about need Stock and Brown Sugar Bakery. She gets all my money because I love caramel cake, cupcakes, you name it, any product that she sees me on a regular basis. So
yes, I love it. Well, I have a big event coming up, so I put in big tickets, big entries. Also with some planning while at Norm's Bistro for the event. But Dejen Collections, DJENNE Collections, African store, Kyra Imports, another African store, Sage and Shay, another African store, all of these things in preparation for our celebration for Black History Month. So yeah, I participated.
Well, I just want to thank you ladies for participating. And Lady Yvonne, I want to say that this was your nugget that you brought up in one of our meetings and how we actually ended up participating. So thank you for that.
From a nugget to 50,000. Yes. What a nugget.
Right. One nugget to $50,000 of support and dollars circulating in the Black community. And that is just from our chapter alone. As we said, they're still tallying. So keep us posted if you end up being a raffle winner, and we will also report back, hopefully on our next show. We'll be able to report back on the final total from all of those organizations combined. That actually brings us through to the close of our show for tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, the show has been quite impactful. I feel like I have learned a lot. I feel overwhelmed but optimistic with information. I feel as though there is an educational piece that sometimes we often forget needs to happen before we can actually go out and do the work. We need to learn about these issues and make sure that other people are educated on them. And so I'm just so grateful for Reverend Michelle and the time that she took to be here with us for tonight. So thank you to our guest, Reverend Michelle Day of Nehemiah Trinity Rising. And again, if you are interested in their services, here is her contact information. You can reach out to her directly regarding those services. If you work in the public health sector, this is something that we would love to see more of in our Black community, very focused program. So if you work in the public health sector, please take this information down and reach out to her. Okay. I would like to thank you ladies for hosting our show tonight. Thank you very much. I would also like to thank our chapter who has been in the chat, keeping up great activity. Thank you to our guests for tuning in tonight. And thank you to the whole Status of Women Thrust, as well as the top teens and Status of Women. We are working hard to bring you excellent programming. And so we thank you for continuing to join us on our 5th season of the Diamond View. It's hard to believe it's been 5 seasons. I also want to thank my brother, Joseph Smith of Graymore Photography, for our audio visuals. So
thank you, bro. Well, each show, my heart is full. My brain is grateful for the information. This has just been, I have a good time. I feel like I'm one of the watchers on, so to speak. Like, what are they going to talk about the next time on Decision Day? So I have a good time. Thank you all. Thank you, ladies.
And I'm grateful too. This platform has been a great avenue for us to share some great information. Every episode, we're getting more and more education on, like I said earlier, on topics that we don't talk about in our community. You know, a lot of times in the Black community, we are shunned for talking about things like that, pregnancy and other issues. And, you know, we sweep everything under the carpet, so to speak. And, you know, it's good that we actually are able to talk about things like this on this platform to educate our community, because as we serve in these organizations, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to serve the people. So we are serving, you know, the people by providing them with knowledge. And we know that knowledge is key. And, you know, if you have a strong mind, you can do anything, you know. So and in times such as these, we really do need to be educated about what's going on around us, about everything that's going on around us, you know, and not be ignorant and turn a deaf ear to what's going on, but stay, you know, just stay engaged to know and stay ahead and be prepared, you know, for whatever is to come. So thank you again for this platform. I think we're just doing what we're supposed to do.
This is true. And ladies and gentlemen, we want you to remember to take our survey. It is pinned in the chat. We encourage you to like and share our social media pages so that you can keep up with the Will County Black Diamond chapter, because we're doing things out here, okay? And Top Ladies of Distinction in general, we are doing wonderful work in the community. So we do encourage you to like and share on the socials. And we look forward to our Decision Day episode of the Diamond View, which will be a teen takeover episode. We have 5 seniors this year, just on Status of Women alone.
Wow.
So we have 12 seniors that are going to be graduating from our TTA. So it is going to be an amazing episode. I'm really excited already. That's going to be Thursday.
Don't miss our babies.
I know I am going to miss our babies. And so, yes, we'll miss them. Don't make me teary-eyed. But yeah, so we encourage you to mark your calendar for Thursday, May 1st, for that Decision Day episode. And you know what? Until then, keep shining.
Keep shining.
Keep shining.